What do you think then is preventing some people? What are some of the obstacles, sorry, that are preventing some people from having more healthy, open, and transparent conversations when it comes to sex?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And the timing of that is amazing because I literally just recorded this week an episode of my podcast around why is sex considered so taboo. It hasn't been released yet, but people get a sort of a preview of what I'm going to talk about in that episode right here on your show. Because, you know, in this industry, I have been shadow banned and demonetized and, everything you can think of because of the nature of the topic. And so that got me really thinking recently, like, why? Why is sex so hard to talk about? Why do we consider it so taboo? And so I started digging into some of the research on that. And believe it or not, there actually is research on that topic. And I found it rather interesting. There's a couple of things that psychology talks about. The first one is that uh, sex is a very physical, primal act. Uh, in a way, it's sort of animalistic, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be because we're more evolved than animals are, so we can treat it differently. But it is a very sort of core base, animalistic act. And because of that, the psychologists say that it reminds us so much of our animal nature, uh, and it potentially threatens our view that we are a spiritual being. And so therefore we're like, we don't want to look at it. Like, no, 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 no. No, no, we don't want to look at that. That's our animal nature. We want to pretend that doesn't exist because we're so much better than that. We're so much more evolved than that, right? So that one was one I hadn't thought of, and I found very interesting when researching it. Like, I never considered that that would potentially trigger somebody to the point of like, I don't want to look at that because it's too physical and raw, right? So that's one potential idea. Another one that I think is very common is that most people did not get good sex education. So they weren't taught by their parents, and they weren't taught by their parents because their parents never really learned it properly either, and so on through the generations. And so people don't know really how to talk about it. They don't know what to talk about it. They don't even necessarily know what questions to ask, right? And this happens a lot, you see in the parent-child relationship. So, the child's starting to come of age and the parents are like, I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what to say, right? And so they just don't say anything at all. And so we have this, generation after generation passed down awkwardness around sex. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can remember I had one and only one conversation with my mother about sex when I was a child. And it was only because we had one day in high school, one day where they actually talked about sex. And of course, all the parents knew because they sent letters home to the parents saying, on this day, we're going to have the talk with the kids, right? And I remember coming home from school and my mom simply saying, how did it go? I said a few things. She nodded, and that was it. That was the extent of the conversation, right? And I think that's a similar experience for a lot of people. It's so awkward to talk about because it's always been treated awkwardly. It's been treated awkwardly in schools, by their parents, by the culture, and so they're just like, I don't know what to do with this." I would add one more, if I have time to keep going on as to why it's so hard, but another one that I would suggest is that when we talk about sexual energy, we can call it by a lot of different names. We can call it sexual energy. We can call it chi, jing, prana, universal energy, life force energy. Well, there's a ton of terms out there for it. But the reality is that we really only have one animating life force energy in us, and it's primal, and it is part of that drive to reproduce. And because that energy is so primal yet so powerful, and it's what we use for everything. It's what we used to create in the world. It's the energy we used to create these podcasts, right? To do work, to, create another human being if we choose to procreate. That is really powerful energy. And because it's really powerful, there are absolutely institutions that exist in this world that have a vested interest in controlling that power. Right. And so, how do they control it? Well, they tell you one, it's not powerful. They tell you it's shameful. They tell you don't talk about it. They tell you don't do it. Right. And when you shut down your sexual energy, you're shutting down your creative energy, your productive energy, right? You're shutting it all down. It's not separated, so to speak, right? So I think yet another reason why it's so difficult to talk about is because so many of these institutions, whether they be governments or religious institutions or just other societal institutions, they've all been putting pressure to sort of, put a lid on it. Don't talk about it, don't do it. You shouldn't be doing this, right?
That's a good point because sometimes we forget how much outside factors impacts what we discuss. Like from a culture perspective, I can see some people being hesitant to talk about it because as they grew up, to your point, no one talked about that, right? You saw people with kids, so you assumed, okay, you know what, you have one child, so you did it at least once.
And
Right?
only once.
And only once, right? Like no one ever had the journey where it took them a couple of times to make a child. It's like, okay, you've had one child, you've had sex once, you've had two, you've had sex twice.